Modern MMORPGs tend to be very player-friendly. They try everything to make your experience as pleasant and as streamlined as possible. You'll have quest markers, tutorials, and pop-ups that tell you exactly what you need to do and where you need to go. But things used to be quite different back in the day. Some early online RPGs were quite ruthless. You were often expected to learn how things worked on your own. Online guides weren't as easily accessible as they are now, after all. And if you made a mistake, there could be some hefty consequences. You either lost time, progress, or potentially both. And of course, your experience could be easily ruined by trolls who just wanted to make sure that you had a bad time. I suppose that could still happen even today, but in my opinion, the trolls and bullies back then were simply built different. But perhaps my favorite thing about those old online games though, is that there were all kinds of strange mysteries hiding within them. And back then, I don't think there was any online game that felt more strange and mysterious than Tibia. Tibia first came out all the way back in the dark ages of 1997. It never really got widespread recognition compared to something like World of Warcraft, but it had kind of a cult following. Heck, even PewDiePie was a big fan of it. One of the things that set Tibia apart from the rest of the herd at the time was just how hardcore and intense things were. Newbies did not get a nice welcoming mat when they started the game. They either had to learn how things worked very quickly, or there would be some severe consequences. There were no quest markers or even any real instructions on what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to do it. And if you did die in the game, then you would be set back quite a bit by losing a bunch of XP and items. You could literally lose weeks of progress with just one mistake. But while things could definitely be brutal, there was something special about Tibia that kept people coming back to it over and over. So what was that special thing specifically? Well, you would get different answers depending on who you asked. For me, the most intriguing thing about Tibia was the fact that its world was full of strange mysteries lurking around every corner. Some of them took a very long time to solve, while others have remained unsolved even to this day. Yeah, Tibia is still around. You could play it right now if you wanted to. And while a lot has changed about Tibia over the years, some things have remained the same. Many questions still remain unanswered. Well, I hope you've got your snacks and about 469 liters of Pepsi ready, because today we're gonna take a look into some of the strangest unsolved mysteries of Tibia. Number 1. The Sword of Fury. Rookgard is the name of an island within the game. A long time ago, this was the place most newly created players went to in order to learn basic gameplay. Near the northwest shore of Rookgard, there's a small isle that can be seen, although it appears to be unreachable. There's a sword on that isle, which is surrounded by fire. A sign can be seen nearby. If you interact with it, it says, "You see a sign, you read, only the humble may touch the Sword of Fury." What exactly does that mean? Well, that's what players have been trying to figure out for literally decades. Countless attempts have been made to try and decipher what this sign is trying to say. Only the humble. Well, how does one acquire humility in this world? Over the years, there have been many rumors surrounding the Sword of Fury. Some say that it was the grand prize for winning a contest that took place a long time ago, although that has never been definitively proven. People also used to say that it was a reward given by the development team to the first player on Rookgard who was able to reach level 100. But that player, who went by the name Sunrise, never confirmed this. If you go south from the Sword of Fury, you'll find a mountain. On the second floor of it, there is a sad, lonely minotaur hanging out by a fire. The fire looks a lot like the flames surrounding the Sword of Fury, right? Many believe that this minotaur has a connection to the Sword of Fury. Although it doesn't happen anymore, a piece of parchment used to spawn here. It said, "Still no sign of a ship yet, even though I'm looking out since days now. Never again will I swear in the presence of the Holy Mage, in order to avoid such duties in the future." Perhaps this minotaur was also learning about how to be humble? Nothing ever came out of this, though. So let's take a look elsewhere. There's a strange in-game NPC known as Avatar, who has some interesting things to say about pretty much everything. Most of what he says makes him seem like an arrogant liar, though. But if you mention the Sword of Fury, he says, "Ah, my trusty old sword. I left it on Rookgard years ago, when I left for the main continent." He doesn't really mention anything about how to get the Sword of Fury for ourselves. So is Avatar the original owner of the sword, or just a bumbling, lying moron? It's hard to be certain either way, although the latter option seems more likely to me. I mean, if he's telling the truth, then he must have been humble enough to get the Sword of Fury, but the stuff he says makes me doubt that he has any humility at all. Speaking of humility though, there is one more NPC that we can look into. This one is located in the Temple of Rookgard. Siegfried is a member of the Holy Order of Monks. If you say job to him, he'll reply, "I am just a humble monk. Ask me if you need help or healing." So he's humble. But unfortunately, I don't think he can teach us how to be humble ourselves. Well, so far, we've been able to find some tenuous connections to the Sword of Fury, but nothing truly substantial, I would say. But there is one thing that I haven't mentioned yet. One day, some players noticed that the Sword of Fury just disappeared. Now how did that happen? The sword would return to its rightful place after the server was reset, but would randomly disappear every now and then, which left players baffled. It turned out that a player who went by the name Eklo on Rook was the first individual who figured out how to do it. The steps involved are absolutely bizarre. You need to step on 2 precise map fields in 2 different caves. How someone was able to randomly come across this interaction is beyond me. Anyway, once the sword disappears, it is unclear what happens to it. Logically speaking, one would assume it spawns somewhere else, in a location which is accessible for the player. But no one has been able to figure out where that exactly is. Although there is some evidence that it never respawns anywhere after it disappears. Some people took a look into the in-game data, and it doesn't look like the sword is recreated anywhere else on the island. So where does it go then? Well, it just disappears. And even to this day, after all this time, no one has been able to touch the Sword of Fury. Perhaps it's because no one has yet become humble enough to do it. Number 2. The Warlord Sword. In the city of Abdandriel, there is a place where we can see a whole bunch of weapons on display. We can't take them, but we can check them out. While they're all pretty nifty, there is one that is a bit different from the rest. This weapon is called the Warlord Sword. According to the description, it can only be wielded properly by knights of level 120 or higher. At first glance, this doesn't seem like a big deal, until you try to figure out how to get this sword for yourself. If you head upstairs, you'll find a sweaty Cyclops. Wonderful. His name is, let's call him Ben. Ben here is a smith. He can, apparently, create items, if you bring him the requisite materials. He can also break down certain existing items into materials. If you ask Ben about the Warlord Sword, he'll be willing to craft it for you, if you have the required materials for it. But that is a bit more complicated than it seems. Unfortunately, no one has ever been able to figure out exactly what these materials are supposed to be. Ben won't specify what he needs to craft the sword either. But the assumption is that if you talk to Ben while having the materials he wants in your inventory, then Ben will craft the Warlord Sword for you. I mean, he has it on display downstairs after all. But that has never happened, as far as we know anyway. While this may seem similar to the Sword of Fury mystery, there is a bit of a difference here. You see, some players have, allegedly, been able to acquire this legendary weapon, if the rumors are to be believed. Since the old days, a story has been going around that a Tibia god, essentially a member of the development staff, auctioned off the sword to a select group of players. But the story goes that the individual who got the sword had it removed from their account because they, allegedly, used unfairly acquired currency to win it in the auction. But there is no existing log specifying the exact details of this auction, so we don't have definitive proof of this event ever taking place. Another story involves the Minotaur Hell. It is a cave that contains a large number of orcs, minotaurs, and wolves, a very dangerous place for new players. The story goes that a Warlord Sword randomly showed up in the Minotaur Hell, likely as a drop from one of the enemies. The player who picked it up had no idea how incredibly rare the sword was, and soon traded the sword to a more experienced scumbag player who knew of its value. But the scumbag player who took the sword did not really get a chance to enjoy it for too long, as the developers removed it from their inventory, saying that it spawned unintentionally due to a glitch. Again though, all we have here is an unverifiable story. And that's kinda the case with all the information surrounding this sword. Another auction allegedly took place around 2011, where the sword was won for a substantial amount of money, approximately between $10,000 and $20,000. They say that the auction happened on the Tibia forums, but the thread about it is no longer there. But all these stories can't possibly just be works of fiction, right? It seems certain players have been able to acquire the sword at one point or another. Were they all acquired through glitches? Or is there a legitimate method out there? Some people say that there is a quest that can be completed to acquire the sword, and it seems like some players have figured out how to do it. But they keep it a secret to make sure that the value of this legendary item remains very high, in case they ever want to sell it. It sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but you never know. So are some players gatekeeping access to it? Or does the Warlord Sword only exist in myths and stories? Can the right ingredients be found, which will allow the sweaty Cyclops to craft it for us? Perhaps one day we will find the answer. Number 3. The 469 language. In Tibia, there is a race of ancient creatures known as the Bone Lords. At their peak, they used to rule the vast majority of the world. But those days are long gone, and they aren't really that much of a threat anymore. But there is one particularly strange thing about them. They appear to speak in a language of their own, one that is composed entirely of numbers. Also, in the Hellgate library, we can find books which are apparently written in this language. Initially, the players called it the Bone Lord language. As time went by, some players began to think that this language could be decoded, that maybe it was possible to decipher the meaning behind the numbers. As they tried to analyze it, they realized that the numbers 4, 6, and at times 9 were often repeated or showed up with each other in similar patterns. Eventually, the Bone Lord language began to be referred to as the 469 language. Over the years, many attempts have been made to try and decipher it. Players compiled every numeric text, analyzed Bone Lord speech patterns, and even compared the information across game updates to see if anything changed. Many players were sure that there was some kind of key which, if found, would enable them to understand everything. Remember Avatar? Even he seems to understand this language. Or he could just be lying about it, to be fair. They tried every theory they could think of, like using legitimate code-breaking techniques such as position ciphers to try and unlock the language, to looking into religious references in case there was a connection somewhere. As time went by, doubt began to creep into the minds of these players. Their faith began to waver. Many started to think that maybe there was no solution. The developers, to be fair, had never really chimed in to say anything meaningful about the 469 language. At the very least, they never suggested that it was meant to be translated. Eventually, most players lost interest, as they ran out of ideas on how to solve this mystery. As far as I'm concerned, there might be a way to decode this language. It's just that no one has figured out how to do it yet. We have examples of real-life coded messages that took an insanely long time to solve. For example, the Zodiac Killer sent encoded messages to newspapers in the late 1960s. One of the encoded messages remained uncracked for 51 years. It was finally deciphered in the year 2020 by a team using modern computational methods. In those 51 years, I am certain that countless attempts must have been made, and they all had failed. Perhaps the 469 language is still waiting for someone to find some kind of breakthrough. What kind of information will we find if that happens? I am not entirely sure. It could be mundane, or it could change everything. I guess we'll just have to wait and see for now. Number 4. The Serpentine Tower. The Serpentine Tower is one of the most infamous locations in the game, as the very nature of its existence has always been shrouded in mystery. It's a strange place, located in Ankramon, consisting of multiple floors. On one of the floors, you can find a bunch of creatures who are locked away in cages of sorts. On a different floor, you find a room where there's a portal, and a connected yet inaccessible room, which also contains a portal. If you step on the available portal, it'll just put you right back into the room, in front of the open fire. If you take a look at the scenery around you, you would notice that there are 2 pots that are already sitting on their own flames. What we need to do is take the pot that is lying around on the floor and put it on the available fire. After doing that, we'll be able to use the teleport to go into the locked room. Inside, we can find a bunch of items, the most valuable of which is the white pearl. But white pearls can be found elsewhere, so it's not a super unique item. On a related note, in a different quest, a white pearl is used to continue and make progress with the quest. Logically, one would assume that something similar must be done here as well. But before we get to that, there is an unlit torch here, which, if you interact with it, creates a sparkle effect. Now, if you go back to the room with the monsters, you'll find that the fire elemental has been released. After taking care of it, you'll find a lever in its now open room. What does this lever do? Well, there is another floor which we can go to, where we can see a djinn in a cage. The path leading to it is blocked off by a magic barrier. By interacting with the lever in the fire elemental's room, we can get rid of the barrier and face the djinn, who will try to attack us. Close to the djinn, we can find another lever, but this is where we run into a problem. Interacting with this lever doesn't seem to do anything, at least nothing obvious that is easily noticeable. Players have been stuck at this lever since the Serpentine Tower was implemented into the game. Many theories exist on what you're supposed to do next, but none of them have led to anything substantial. There are some valuable items that can be seen around the djinn's room, but they can't be taken, and it's unclear how you're supposed to get to them. There are 4 basins in this room. Many believe that some specific items need to be placed into them, perhaps requiring 4 players to put those specific items into the basins at the same time, while a 5th player simultaneously pulls the lever. But as for what those items could be, well, no one has been able to figure that out. Some players think that the developers have already given us the clues we need. It's just that we haven't figured out how to understand them. If we move the paper on the table, we'll find blood underneath it. We can also see 2 other liquids in the room, the green slime and the blue water. What do you get if you mix green, red and blue? You get white, or so I'm told. And what item do you get from the hidden room? A white pearl. This white pearl must be the key to the next part of the puzzle, or so many believe. But if there really was something going on in the Serpentine Tower, even if it was extremely well hidden, then surely someone must have figured out what to do next by now, right? Well, there is one person who claims that they have not only figured out the secrets of the Serpentine Tower, they have also unraveled most of the mysteries in the entirety of Tibia.
The impossible mystery I solved.
This player, who goes by the name Bubba, has solved the mystery of the Serpentine Tower. Or so they say. We just have to take their word for it, because they refuse to explain how they did it. They essentially want to gatekeep the secrets for some reason. Why? Well, I suppose they want players to figure things out on their own. They have, over time, dropped a few hints at what needs to be done after reaching the djinn, but those hints haven't led to anything worthwhile.
Now, here's a fish, and there's a stone on a sword technically on an island. And this fish is called a marlin. That's all I say.
Now, Bubba has been streaming Tibia for a very long time, and a lot of people do seem to respect him. But there are many who think this whole "I've solved Tibia" thing was a massive trolling attempt by Bubba, and that he became somewhat unhinged over the years. Whether or not you want to believe Bubba is up to you. The only thing we do know with certainty though is that the secrets of the Serpentine Tower continue to remain hidden for most of us. At least for now. Number 5. The 999 Door. When Tibia first came out, one of the most fascinating quirks about it was that it had no level limit. Most MMORPGs had strict level limits, which allowed the developers of the game to create content according to whatever the highest possible level was at the time. But if you wanted to go the no life route and just grind for EXP 24/7, you could do that in Tibia. The problem was that after a certain point, you would find yourself with a serious case of diminishing returns. Getting a single level up would take an enormous amount of time, as the EXP gain was very slow. On a different note, players would often find doors or teleporters which could only be used by players who had reached a certain level. It was to ensure that low-level losers didn't accidentally find themselves in a ridiculously high-level quest area. While that was perfectly valid, there was one door that everyone was curious about. A door that initially seemed impossible to open because you had to be level 999 in order to open it. When this door was first implemented, which was around the year 2005, no player was anywhere near that level. In fact, this seemed like a comically absurd level to even consider getting to. Getting to somewhere around level 100 to 200 was thought to be an incredible achievement, one only the most elite players were capable of. So at that time, getting to level 999 was considered to be essentially impossible. In fact, it took over 10 freaking years before a player was able to get to that level. But finally, a streamer who went by the name Devonica decided to livestream this grand event. Approximately 10 to 15,000 people were watching as Devonica opened the door and was teleported to a special island known as the secret place within the game's log. The player would get a brief congratulations message from the game, and they could also spawn a golden goblet by stepping onto a certain place. The most noteworthy thing here though is that there were high-level NPCs who were standing in a line, waiting to choose their reward. The NPC at the head of the line hasn't decided what they want yet, but there doesn't appear to be a way to move this line and choose your own reward. Some incredible items can be seen in the shop, but there's no way to get them. Beyond that, the rest of the island seems rather boring. There's one more NPC who you can trade with, but they've got nothing unique or special. Everything else seems pretty bland, really. You might be thinking, Editor man, it just looks like the developers made a joke reward for the most sweatiest of sweaty hardcore gamers. Yeah, this sucks, but what's the mystery? Well, you're right, this does seem like a joke, doesn't it? If this was all there was to this island. Many believe that there's more going on here than what meets the eye. They think that there's a secret quest which needs to be completed in order to unlock the true reward. Some say that the key is to figure out how to move those NPCs out of the way, while others say that the trader NPC is the real key. Or maybe there's something everyone is overlooking. No matter what, there has to be something more to all this, right? There's no way that this dumb, half-baked reward is all there is. Well, that's what the theory crafters and the dreamers like to believe, anyway. There are certain players who have a more pessimistic view of things. They think that what we see on the secret island is all there is, that it really is just a joke from the developers, a cruel joke made at the expense of the most hardcore and dedicated players of the game, but a joke nonetheless. In fact, they believe that all the mysteries that we've talked about today have no answers, that the developers have intended for them to remain unsolvable for one reason or another. Why would the developers do that? Well, maybe because an unsolved mystery keeps people coming back for more. Kinda like the early days of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, where people kept talking and theorizing about the story. If a mystery gets solved, then people would lose interest very quickly. But an unsolvable mystery that looks like it can be figured out? Maybe that's what the developers of Tibia were going for. But at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, it kinda comes down to what you wanna believe. There have been many gaming mysteries in the past that took years for people to unravel. What do you believe? Do you think that the mysteries in this game are designed without a conclusion? Or do you think that the keys to their solutions are hidden in the world of Tibia, waiting to be found? Do let me know what you think in the comments. Well, that's gonna do it for today. Thank you everyone for watching. Check out my Patreon for more cool stuff. Take care and, most importantly, be humble.